the allegory of the cave, it basically, I'll just describe first what it is, and how the story goes. It's a beautiful story or dialogue, as I said. And then I will go a bit into, the meaning and how we could, I don't know, take out messages from that in our everyday life and see how it helps us in a way to, I don't know, infuse wisdom in our everyday life, I would say. And it's a practical wisdom. So in the Allegory of the Cave by Plato, so what there is, you can see a cave. I'm just holding it up here. So you can see a cave, and in the cave, on the bottom here, basically on the one side of the cave, there are people sitting, and they're chained to the floor, and basically they're chained, and they can't move, they can't do anything, okay? And so they're sitting there, they were born there, and stop holding it up. They were born there, and they basically, what they see on the wall is the shadows that are reflected from the symbols from the back. So just to show again, here the people are sitting, there are people who are holding up symbols, and there is a fire. So that's a source of light. And here as well for Instagram. So here's the people sitting, there are shadows on the wall, there's people holding up symbols, and there's a fire. So that's all happening within the cave. And these people, they basically sit there, they're chained to the ground, and they can't move, they can't look back. That's an important point. And what they basically see is on the wall, they see the shadows, how they move. And if you asked one of those people who are sitting there, what is reality? They would obviously say, reality is what I've always seen since I'm young. My parents, my friends, all of society, they have seen those shadows on the wall, and they would say they are reality. The shadows on the wall are reality. And basically, I already maybe bring some meaning into it. So Plato, by describing these people who are basically prisoners in the cave, he describes that this is what society is about. So this is representing society, the people that are chained to the ground, and they're looking at shadows, which are basically illusions, and that's what he calls a society. And within the society, there's all the stuff going on that you go into a career. There's all the emotions. There's the conflicts. There's war. There's happiness. There's everything is going on that level within that society, within that cave. And people try to be basically better than the others. They compare each other with the others, but all of it is happening within that cave, and that's important. I'm just holding it up again. So everything is happening within that cave, and that's one of the keys, because people, they always strive to become more happy, and in a way, when you look at this whole analogy here, they try to become more happy, and in a way they try to get out of the cave and get into the sun or nature where the true light is, not the true wisdom. But what they are doing is they heard of that, but they're trying to find that true wisdom within the cave, and by comparing themselves with the others in the cave. So for them, what they're trying to do is they're just trying to become better than the other people in the cave. So they compare each other. They try to play games, where they are better in guessing what shadow has been reflected to the wall, and nitty-gritty games like that. And they take a lot of, they take all their self-worth into that. So it's like us with society, with our job. We think our job is the most important thing. It's so important, we have it, we keep it. And if our manager is not nice to us, we get really concerned, and if something is not going so well, it's not so great. On the other hand, if something is going great, our relationship, our job, then we are happy. So, but that means that our happiness is constantly linked to the events happening within that cave. And that's sort of describing, what most of our lives look like. So if there are good news in society, we seem to be relieved and happy. If there are bad news in society, we seem to be down. If some member of family is not doing well, we seem to be really concerned. And so on and so on. That means basically our happiness or our beingness is so dependent on everything that's happening around us. And it's like there's a quote from Siddhartha, a book by Hermann Hesse, which says, some, like most of us are like a leaf in the wind, a leaf from a tree. And the wind comes and it's just blown left and right and forth and back. And that's how most of us are. So depending on the events, that's how we feel. And he says only a few of us are like stars that know their own path, and they know where they're going, they know what their purpose is, and that's what they do. And I think that's a very beautiful summary of that. So basically, and now it gets really exciting, I think. So what happens here, so you have the cave, and these are the people that are looking at shadows. So if you take one of the people that are chained all their lives, they have been chained to the ground, and you take one of them and you unchain them, you basically tell them, hey, look, I'll take you from here, I'll show you the truth, right? Most of them, they would actually be reluctant, because they would be like, no, it's okay, I'm good. Because the people in the cave, they believe that they are fine and they're happy, and they will find the true happiness or whatever they're looking for within the cave. And those caves, in a way, for those people who are, let's say, into, I don't know, psychology, NLP, and those kind of things, it represents, in a way, a belief system, or it represents conditionings that we have, and so on. So basically, someone is picking them up, they are unchained, and the first reaction would be, when they're looking towards the light in that story, first reaction would probably be, it's too bright, that light, because they're only used to a very dark section, meaning, they're very dark, I don't know, very limited beliefs, very limited conditionings within the tolerance level for pain or suffering is very, very high. That means they can take a lot of, shit in a way, but they still think they're happy because they compare themselves with all the other people in the cave. But so the first reaction would be like, oh my God, this is too bright. It doesn't feel right. I want to go back. But then, and if you ask them immediately what's more real, or which is more real than what you just saw, the shadows in the cave or those people holding up those signs, the symbols, most likely this person would say, oh yeah, what I'm used to, where I come from, what my parents, my family, my society, my friends, what they believe, that's more real. And an example of this could be, any kind of insight that you have had in your life. It could be, those deep insights where it clicks, you have maybe heard about it or you haven't heard about it, and it clicks and some kind of shift is happening in your perception or in seeing reality. That's sort of the kind of insights you get. And so basically, first reaction would be no. The shadows on the wall are more real than the symbols. And basically, it's a funny thing because the shadows on the wall, and you can tell them, no, but you're wrong. It's not true. The shadows on the walls are not more real than the symbols themselves. And they would argue, they would find any reason why they are right. And I think that's an amazing thing, because when we are so narrow-minded in those beliefs and where we sort of navigate in, and we actually would defend that reality, because in my eyes, there's no such thing as an objective reality out there. It's like we project a lot, maybe if not all, onto those realities. And yeah, and that's I think it's amazing. So they would defend their point, and so basically it would take, let's say, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, or some time, that if you, once they see a bit more, maybe I hold a bigger picture up. Once they see a bit more, the relation between the moving symbols and the shadows on the wall, once they see that if this is moving, then this is moving, they would see a bigger context of reality, and then they would be able to understand, okay, yes, this is a higher reality than the shadows. And only once they see the connections between the two, they would be convinced, because they, on their experiential level, they would say, yes, the symbols themselves is more real than their shadows on the wall. And only then would they come to the conclusion, yes, this is more real. So now it gets really interesting, because once they go back, let's say one person has been here and they have seen the reality in the cave. It's still within the cave. It's also important to see. But let's say they have seen the reality, and they go back to their friends and they be like, hey, I'm so excited. I've seen the reality. Like, we grew up in something it's an illusion. Like, we would go back to our mother, to our father, to our siblings, to our friends, and be like, oh my God, it's crazy. You've been in this cave all this time. You thought that, those shadows on the wall are reality. How, like, it's insane. And guess what they would say? They would say, what do you mean? Like, there is only one reality. There's only the shadows on the wall. I don't know what symbols you're talking about. Like, what have you been, I don't know, smoking, or what have you been doing? There is no such thing as other stuff than what we see. And I think that's really exciting, because, I'm sure you guys have had those, deep experiences, or these insights, and, you wanted to communicate those, but it's impossible. We cannot, also there's another saying, it's a quote also from this book, Siddhartha. He says we can communicate, what does he say? We can communicate knowledge, but not wisdom. And that's exactly like that. So the deeper the wisdom is, it may even sound foolish to those people, who haven't seen it or experienced it, but we can't communicate this wisdom. And that's really interesting. It's just, something that's how it is. And because many people get frustrated, they say, look, this is the truth, right? And I need to defend the truth, and I need to make sure I fight for the truth. But based on this, what Plato is saying, there is no such thing as a truth. Yes, relatively, for these people, there's maybe something a truth. A truth is basically a common agreement on something, what's right or wrong. But once you have seen the deeper reality, which is one step further, you understand that these people would deny it. They would say you're a fool, but at the end, in this analogy, you have seen deeper wisdom. And this happens a lot. Even back in the days that Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, some of them, they were killed for having those insights and, and saying what they said, because they were saying things that were probably here, and they were saying those, the people who listened or who governed the country, they were here, and then they said, oh my God, they are foolish, they will destroy society. And society, in a way, doesn't want the people to be free. But not just that, they don't know. They think really it would really hurt society, and that's fascinating. So anyway, so then you can go a step further and say, okay, you are in the cave, and then there's the next step to get out of the cave, and then it's the same process from here. And okay, so what he's also saying is that these people who are holding up those symbols, they're the opinion leaders. So this represents society, the people who are in prison. These guys, and it's important to see that these guys are also in the cave. They are not like, here in the freedom. They are within the cave, also imprisoned. But however, they see themselves as the opinion leader, and the society is doing what they sort of showing, right? They show love, you should do this, they show money, you should chase the money, and so on. So, but it's important to see that they're still within the cave. They are not free. But you know, within this image, the people who are sitting here, they would probably think, oh my God, if I just were one day like, I don't know, a millionaire, or you know, free of what I am, or I could govern a country, and we put it up on a pedestal in a way and think this is something great to do. But actually, it's all within the cave, you know. So the next step is basically to get out of the cave, and the same thing will happen again. You will step out. First, it's very bright, so someone is dragging this person out, and you know, it's very bright, and you wouldn't see anything first, and you would need to get used to. You want to go down again because that's what we're used to. But then slowly, if you, let's say, in a way forced to stay out there, you know, slowly the eyes will adjust to this brightness and everything. But the funny thing, you know, what is also really interesting is once we have those insights, and they're like, you know, and most of the times it's just us, and maybe if we have one friend or a few people, or we read a book and we feel like, wow, I have this insight, it's amazing. Many times it's sort of almost like we forget about it, or we don't take it very seriously, because all the people around us, they still believe, you know, in the illusions and in the old stuff. So it's actually a challenge sometimes to take that in a way sincerely, and to, you know, to continue seeing the world in that way, because it can, society in a way, you know, in that regard, is trying to get us back into the cave, right? So it's really almost like a test. Where do we put our trust? Do we put our trust in society and in our thinking and in our feeling? Or do we put our trust in that new freedom, or freedom, what we actually are? And that's like a test almost, you know? We've all had experiences of freedom, and then something is dragging us back there. And that's not others or society. I think it's much more like where we put our trust as, you know, who we are. But it's like within ourselves, you know, those beliefs, and that's all happening actually within ourselves. So that we're imprisoned here is not something that of, you know, the bad society that they're trying to do this, or media. Because you can have the worst media, the worst everything, the worst people around us, the worst people governing us, but it's always in a way us giving the power away to not trust what we actually are or what we see, but to trust those thoughts and those feelings and the sense of fear. So yeah, I think that's also important to understand. So in a way, so ultimately we are dragged out of the cave where we see the wisdom, and we are free. That means basically freedom. And it's important to see as well, you know, freedom doesn't mean like, look, you could say you have seen the wisdom and the light, and then freedom doesn't mean that we like necessarily have to stay there. It's not like a location, but it's more like a mindset, or you know, a sense of identity, or a sense of freedom, right? It's like that. And so basically what he says as well is, at the end, isn't it the responsibility of that person who has seen the light and the wisdom to go back to the people who are imprisoned, and then, you know, basically dragging them out? He calls it in a way dragging them out. And isn't that the job of that person? And it's a really interesting question, because, you know, what I said earlier, if it's not possible to communicate wisdom, how is it possible then to you know, drag these people out? And that's really interesting, because in a way, if these people knew about this whole context, they would, I would say most of the people, they would, you know, they would want to run out and be like, oh my God, yeah, I want to go there. But funnily, if you look at our society, and if, you know, look at people where they are, they're not running out there, because in a way, as I said, the prison that Plato talks about here is self-made. And that's in a way interesting because yeah, that's why, you know, that's why we're not running out, because we're making it ourselves every day. We're like stuck in something that we have never been in, and that's I find fascinating. So if we describe a bit more the life in this cave and in this society, like, you know, I find it fascinating because, as I said, you can tell people and say, hey, you live in this cave, you're imprisoned, you don't see the freedom, the love, the joy that is out there, that actually is your true nature. And that's also important, I think, to understand, you know, in this context. It's not something that we are here and we have to find a way out. In my eyes, it's more like, you know, in a way, it's an analogy, but we are here, we are that light. And in a way, we have forgotten that we are this light, something in us, and we pretend we identify with this illusion of this imprisoned person. So it's like we are actually paradise, we're the light, but we pretend we're like in this cave and we're in prison. But the it's because, in a way, you know, I also speak a lot about the being and the becoming. So for me, and you know, if you look at um, if you look at the you know the first sort of starting point where we are, our starting point is here. But what we usually do is we presuppose that our starting point is here. And that's, in my eyes, the first and probably what the biggest dilemma ever is, to pretend and presuppose that we are here in a way. And that's like, you know, you can do that. So that's but in the other hand, this is the productive part, or this is being produced, and this is where we are. But we act like, as this action figure, that we are here and we have to produce this. And if you ask me, that's like the whole dilemma of spirituality, of, you know, self-improvement, and of, you know, all this kind of stuff that we read. But so here's a question from Thomas. Am I watching the mind, or is the mind watching itself? So to this question, I would say, I mean, the only thing that is watching, or the only thing that that is able to perceive in a way, I don't know what you mean by mind. There's different definitions by mind. Some people call mind, like, let's say, the thinking system, the thought system, and some people call big M mind, like the, you know, the Buddhist, I think, like the big thing, basically the light. So maybe you can specify. But basically, what happens is, this I would call like awareness, or the formless, and this is basically the becoming process, right? This is produced and presupposed, and this is what we are. And yeah, let's go a bit into, because what happens is, you know, when we are able to describe this, then we see what we're not. Because while, you know, while it seems for many of us that we're sort of stuck in this cave, we are actually never actually in it. It never actually happens. It only seemingly happens so. So what helps is that we describe this, we can create a distance in a way, and then we see that we're in it. Because it's, you know, for me, one of the biggest, let's say, I don't know, the most beautiful things in this is this analogy, or this allegory, is like, it takes us out of this cave. It's able that, like, whatever we pretend to be in every day, it has the capacity to pull us out, that we see actually that, you know, the form, the world of form, is probably working on that level, but what we are is here. So it's like, it helps us to pull us out, and we can see the cave from outside. Although maybe, you know, this body mind is probably operating here, but we can pull ourselves out. And I think that's the beauty. Hold on, so there's another question. from K. Maturu, how do we regain awareness of being the formless? So that's exactly the trick, that we don't have to regain awareness of being the formless, because we have never been out of the formless, and it's a very tricky and a very subtle thing to see, because I think a lot of spirituality is trying to do exactly that. And that's exactly, again, the starting point. We presuppose, so we are the formless. We presuppose that we are the form. We identify as the action figure. And then we try to get out of the action figure, get out of the suffering, which is sort of, part of being the action figure is the suffering. And we try to get out of the action figure as the action figure and try to become what we already are. And that's exactly the dilemma. That's why I think there are so many people out there, and who in a way have many big insights, but in a way it seems like we're running against the wall constantly, because we don't see that first starting point. Because as long as we try to escape something that we have never been in, it will be a journey that will go on forever. And that's something that I see so widespread in especially in circles of spirituality. There's nothing wrong with spirituality, but I think when we don't see those big fallacies, it can be very frustrating. And also, it's important, like maybe I'll speak about this again, this becoming and being. So we see ourselves in a process of becoming. It's almost like on a timeline, right? There's a timeline, a horizontal line, and we pretend like we were born here, now we're running here. It's a constant time ticking thing. That's the process of becoming, because we have objectified ourselves. We have objectified who we are. It's almost like, if you take it, that's not good. So anyway, we have objectified ourselves, and we can only see what we try to become. So we identify ourselves as what we were and what we will become. That on that level, on that axis, we're never satisfied with anything that's happening. Never. It doesn't matter how much money we would have. It doesn't matter how many great relationships we have. It doesn't matter anything. All your wishes. And what keeps this alive, this hope, is hope. And it's basically this hope that something will improve. So if we have a hope that something will improve one day, that's postponing, and that's running away and escaping what is already here right now. That's like one of the biggest things. So, it starts like this. I hope you see the mechanism of this in society. Like, you go to school, you try to get good grades, and then people, they don't tell you you're great for just being awareness, but you are great because you have achieved this. And you haven't achieved this, you're not good. So you always evaluated for what you're achieving and what you're doing. And yeah, that's the mechanism of society. But it goes so much further, that even in spirituality, and when it comes to terms like enlightenment and realization and liberation, it's actually even, let's say, worse, because people, they have insights, but they think they are running on some kind of timeline, and they have heard of these big words, enlightenment and liberation and so on. But so what's happening is that they're trying to become this big word, this concept that they have, as the action figure which they have presupposed. And that's the whole dilemma. That shows exactly the whole dilemma. That's what's happening. And there's so much, like, look, let's go into this. You go on a retreat, okay? Retreats are great for the body mind, but you go on a retreat and then you hope. So what happens is, you go on a retreat with the hope that one day you will get it. You will understand this whole mechanism. And guess what? That what you take yourself to be will never get it, ever. And that's the whole dilemma, because it's happening on this horizontal timeline, and it will never get it. So it's not a matter of how great you are, how great of a spiritual person you are. And you know, this is happening constantly. We say, oh, I'm so, like, we listen to someone, we say, oh, I'm so much more spiritual, oh, I get it more than this person. But it's not about that at all. That actually takes you back into this cave. That's because it's comparing and judging. So what's actually enough is, so I was describing the horizontal, and that's the becoming. But what's actually enough is to see that what you already are, without having to do anything, is the being, and that's the vertical, and that's timeless. It doesn't know time. It's not of time. And that's, so what the dilemma is exactly that. We're trying to become. It will never be reached on that level, not seeing that what we are is this, and this one can only exist in this. So that's the whole dilemma. So as long as we believe, like as I said again, we are this, the timeless, the formless, we presuppose we're this, and then we try to become this as this, and that will never work. That's the whole dilemma. Like, and you know, yeah, I don't know. So anyway, here's a few questions. Amogascha, I hope I pronounced it right. Is there truly an action figure? Truly, if all there is the infinite, then the action figure is nothing but that. Exactly. So the action figure, you know, the action figure, like I guess sometimes, let's go into this, because sometimes I give the analogy with the screen and the movie, right? So that we are, what we are is the screen, the formless. And all the movies, so all the objects, all the action is happening within the movie. And the movie can only take place because it's on the screen. And so if you look truly, coming to your question, if you look truly at the action figure, it's nothing but a pixel on the screen. And it's just appearing and disappearing. And that's it. So an action figure is only, it only exists in a way as a bundle of thoughts and experiences and feelings. And that's it. So yes, exactly, it's like that. So here's a few more questions from Find Your Silence. What do you think causes us to objectify ourselves in the first place? I don't know, I wouldn't go into, you know, all the, like as I said, I think last time, the why questions and how questions, they are usually taking us, I don't know, in a direction where, you know, I'm not so interested in, and it doesn't add anything. I think it's a very interesting, like, look, if you look at the why questions, where they usually come from, yeah, they usually come from is trying to understand. And in society, let's say there is an airplane crash. So what we do is we try to understand why it happened. So out of fear, because then when we understand why it happens, we can avoid that this will happen again. That's exactly, you know, an attribute of the action figure. It tries to understand everything. And once it believes that once it understands everything, then it can be free. But the more we try to understand this on that level, the more we actually go away from what already is so. So you know what it causes, I don't know. I think it's enough to see, you know, and sometimes those questions, you know, I've also had those questions, but sometimes they help us also to escape from what actually matters, to see what we truly are. So I would, instead of going into this question, I would say, hey, look, where does this question come from? Just instead of trying to understand, and then sometimes we do that. We say, okay, I'm going to jump. You know, let's say there's a staircase in heaven or wherever, and we try to understand something new, and we don't dare, because we say to ourselves, once I understand it, then I will jump. But I think it's more like you take a step, a leap of faith, and you take the step without having anything in the ground, and then it will come. The staircase will come. That's my experience. So yeah, I just encourage you to, you know, not try to understand this, but just do the step. So Thomas is saying, thank you, I meant the thinking mind. Am I just the body mind realizing I am as much this body as the world around me? Or is my consciousness really separate, making a body, mind, spirit? Again, am I just the body, mind, realizing I am as much this body as the world around me, or is my consciousness really separate, making a body, mind, spirit? So, I mean, look, so the thinking mind, the thinking process is just a process. It's not, it doesn't have reality. So when we come to this example, this is basically reflecting the thinking mind, which is in essence an illusion. Okay, so that's important. So, but what happens is usually we take ourselves, we presuppose that we are this body mind, and this, especially the thinking. You know, we're so obsessed with the thinking that we can't even imagine that we are not the thinking. And that's sort of also where this question is coming from, is the answer is already, if it's an illusion, it can't be real. So then where can it come from? It's definitely not coming from the mind, but it's basically consciousness in a way having forgotten. You can't even say that, but let's say I'm trying to use words that sort of point towards that. But it's consciousness having forgotten what it truly is. But even that doesn't matter because, you know, like you are what you are at any given time. That never changes. You cannot become what you not are. So, but I'm just trying to conceptualize it a bit. So, like consciousness, what you are, has forgotten what it is, and it has lost itself in a way. It has lost itself in the world of form, and it's doing its thing, and it doesn't have the, you know, it believes it's lost there, and that's it. So I would like, maybe to describe it better, I would use the analogy of a dream. Let's say you are lying in bed, you're sleeping, then you're dreaming, and basically what happens is you have forgotten that you're sleeping in your bed. There's a whole different world that has been created in this dream. But when you're in the dream, it seems real for the action figure who is objectified in the dream. And everything from that perspective seems to be real. But if you told that action figure, which is impossible because it's a different realm, if you told this action figure, hey, you're an illusion, this action figure wouldn't understand what's an illusion because it's fully fully in that world. And but then once you wake up from the dream, you understand that this action figure was just an appearance and it has no reality. So it's almost, you could ask that question, say, from that dreamt object, from that dreamt action figure in the dream, you know, does it come from there, or is it from the, you know, person sleeping? So I think that should answer it. So here's Alone is asking or saying, so every thought is illusionary? Wow, good news. Yes, yes. And that's really good news because, you know, from my experience and also from what I see in others, this is the biggest sense of freedom is coming from that, because we are so obsessed with thoughts because we think they are from us and about us. That's why there is such an obsession with thoughts. And we're trained over many years. We are trained that those thoughts are from us and about us. It's not even possible for us to create that distance. And that's why it feels like we're hypnotized to thoughts. And you know, and because look, imagine that. Okay, so imagine you're driving in California, you're driving the Highway 1 down the coast from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and you're listening to nice music, and then it's all good, right? And then you listen to the radio and people speak about whatever. Doesn't matter. You're just enjoying the view and you're enjoying everything. So all of a sudden, imagine that the radio host would speak about you, constantly about you and what you have done in the past, and about your future, what will happen, and you would be obsessed. You would be like, oh my God, why are they speaking about me on the radio? I can't believe it. Like, oh, hopefully they're only gonna go say great things about me and not the bad stuff. Oh my God, what should I do? And you would call the radio station, be like, hey, you can't just talk about me. So that's sort of the obsession that's happening when we believe the thoughts are coming from us and are about us. That's exactly like that. But when you see that the radio station or this thought system that's happening is just a constant stream, and you can easily see that. I mean, look, you don't have to do anything. The thought stream, you cannot change it, you cannot control it because it's happening anyway. And how can you figure that out? Don't believe me. Just sit there and observe what's happening without doing anything, and you will see those thoughts come and go, and there's good thoughts coming, there's bad thoughts coming. The more we try to control it, the more we are controlled by it. Because we end up saying, oh my God, I went to this positive thinking seminar, and now I'm only thinking positive thoughts. You have these people, they say that even. They claim that they can only have positive thoughts, but they don't see that what's happening actually is there's all thoughts coming, positive, negative, whatever. And then there's a denial. Let's say a negative thought comes and there's a denial happening. No. I only have positive thoughts. Yeah. And then what they do actually, there's a denial of the negative thoughts. They push them away. And in a very subtle level, by pushing them away on that level, they attract them a lot, but on a different level. And that's actually, for the action figure, it's not as good as if you just see what they are. So yes, but the good news is that every thought is illusory, but not just every thought. I think if you go all the way, you will see that the body-mind itself, what we just said, is illusory. Because the first step, when we are able to, let's say, see that thoughts are just coming and going, we were like, wow, but we're still anchored in the body. That's sort of, in a way, the last thing that's a bit harder than even the thoughts. So, what happens a lot is we say, okay, oh wow, I'm free of thoughts now, great. But we take that the body-mind is free of thoughts. That doesn't work, because, we're still in the movie. The body-mind is part of the movie. So we think the effect of thoughts now has a better effect for the action figure. Again, you see? So it's a radical solution. The radical solution is to see that all of this, as I said, not from here, but from here, all of this is illusory, but only it's important. Because if, you could also say, then it doesn't matter, I can do anything, I can just walk around and do whatever I want. No, that doesn't work either, because it's not an excuse, it's not a giving away responsibility for the action figure. Because, as I said earlier, within the dream, it seems as a reality, right? Within that dream. So within that dream, it's good for the action figure, I don't know, to be generous and to, to care for the environment, all this stuff. But it doesn't matter ultimately at all, because it's just a dream. But all I'm saying is, I see people that confuse and say, oh, all is illusory, so I don't care, I'll just lie on my couch and do anything. That attitude doesn't work, and it doesn't work anyway, because, I think there's anyway no control over this movie that we have. We pretend we do, but we don't. Anyway. Another question is there any such thing as enlightenment? The question or the point to this is that there's nobody to be enlightened, okay? On some level, you could say there's something like a realization, but it's reality realizing itself, which it doesn't need, because let's say there's body minds who see, okay, let's use that again. Let's see there's body minds that see that they're sitting in here, and there's body minds not seeing that they're in here. I think that's the difference, but it's important. I think on some level, on energetic level, there is something like enlightenment, but nobody has ever been enlightened and can speak about it, because there's nobody there. There's only one. It's not even an entity. There's only one. There's not two, and not even one, but there's the formless. So yeah. So Holly Go Yoga is saying or asking, it's about my post today, the story of good thing, bad thing, who knows? Isn't that isn't it that ultimately we are only an essence of love? Yes, ultimately we're an essence of love, but you know, this is also one of the most important points here. You know, when the action figure hears that we are ultimately love, what usually happens is that the action figure takes that ultimate love and joy and peace as an attribute of the action figure. And that can, in a way, go in a weird direction. So, what I'm saying in a way is, yes, it's true. What we are ultimately is the formless, and that's just, yeah, the essence. It's made of love. It's a love that the action figure doesn't even like. It will never be able to comprehend that. But in a way, it's better to tell this formless, that, you know, to show it what we're not, than to tell the action figure what it is. Because, as I said earlier, on the horizontal of the becoming, when the action figure hears, oh wow, I'm love, then it's trying to sort of put this thing here and it's trying to become love, you know. And that's, again, a very subtle thing, but it can be very dangerous in a way, because it causes even more suffering. But yes, ultimately, for the formless, it's obvious, right? A formless thing cannot become better or worse or good enough or not good enough. It's like operating in a whole different realm, and that's the beauty. Yeah. And yeah, without attachment, and yeah, that's the beauty of it. And I mean, that's the whole message in a way, you know. And like, I think it always comes back to the starting point. Like, as I say, sometimes you hear about that, you know, I show you how to get more in the moment. It's really like, I tell you, it's so amazing to be in the moment, to be present, and I show you how to do it. I give you a book, you can read this book, and then one day you will be in the moment. And I saw that you're already 30% in the moment and present, but I show you how to do 70%, 90%, and 100%. But this is hoax. This is exactly the hoax, because the hoax is not to go into those seminars and read those books, but the hoax is to believe that it's ever possible not to be in the moment. That's sort of the immunity, if you will. And it always comes back to that, because once you have bought into the idea that it's possible to get into a moment, then it's gone, you know. Then you can find many solutions, you can find many teachers, you can find theories and concepts and cults, and they will all be crazy and obsessed with getting somewhere into the moment, let's say in this example. And there will be many amazing techniques, and it's very exciting. You imagine you're like in a group, and maybe who is the first one to achieve to get into the moment. It's very exciting, you know, for the action figures. But guess what if you have never left the moment? What if it's not possible to ever leave the moment, no matter how real it will appear to you? And that's freedom. That's true ultimate freedom. And it's not bound to time, and it's not bound to any requirements whatsoever. You know, what we talk about here is not reserved to an elite. It's not that someone here is enlightened and the others are not. It's not like this. It's so much, I don't know, it's so obvious. Like, if you just feel, I don't know, not even feel, it's like, if you just look at what this is all made of, the answer is right there. And you know, yeah, it's right there. It doesn't require anything. And there's freedom and beauty, but not as what you take yourself to be, but as what you already are. And there's a, you know, I love the sentence which says, be what you cannot not be. Because many times, you know, when let's say you listen to this and you hear, you'll be like, oh my God, I really need to take this point out and apply it in my life. You know, the train is gone. The train has left the station, because you cannot take anything out of this, because if you do it, then the starting point is gone. You see, So it's in a way, instead of trying to be like, okay, I have to take notes and I have to do these 3 things on Tuesdays and these 5 things on Saturdays. Instead of that, it's more like, okay, like just question what you have believed in, question what you just jump in without being aware of, you know. And it's the hardest thing in a way, to become aware of what you're not aware of, right? And but yeah, that's basically it. So Amogastra is asking, who is truly the I we refer to ourselves as? So it depends what you refer to yourself as, but so the ultimate I, the true I, the only I there is what I call the formless. So that's who we are. And there's not 8 billion I's, but there's basically one I. And when we refer to, let's say, in everyday life to an I, then it means I, Benjamin, I, Guy, I, whoever. And then we say, I am doing this. I, Benjamin, I'm speaking right now. I'm listening. I am doing this. So, you know, there's in the Hindu philosophy, they say there's the I, which is sort of the ultimate. Then there's the I amness. And then there's the I am Benjamin, or I am an object. So in the third level that I just said, it's an objectified world. In the I amness, it's like in a way a beingness. Or you can also say, some people would call it the oneness. But then there's one sort of level back, which is sort of nothing. But that's what everything is made of. So yeah, you're just saying, yeah, just live. Yeah, not even that, you know, just live. Like, as I said, you know, yes and no, but be what you cannot not be. I think that summarizes it. Because even if you say, oh, then I should just, what should I do? Should I just live? Should I do this? That's already, ask the question, where is this coming from, this thought? Who has that thought? And as I said, you know, the biggest obscuring factor in all of this, you can listen to the wisest message in the world, the biggest wisdom, okay? It depends from which angle or perspective we listen to it. If we listen to it from the action figure, it will obscure everything. It will obscure the most holy scripts and anything that comes into its way. So in a way, it's not so much what we listen to, but also a quality of, you know, how we listen to things. Are we open enough, humble enough to just listen without judgment, to listen without comparison, to listen without goals? You know, because we are so obsessed with, oh, I don't feel well, I need to get well again. Oh, I don't feel I'm much present. Somebody told me I'm not present enough, I need to be more present. You know, go in the other direction. If you feel like you're not present enough, then see, who is it? You know, you probably all know him, Ramana Maharshi. The question, who am I? You know, if he said as well, if there's any technique you want to do in understanding of who you really are, just ask yourself, who am I? Like, ask yourself, if this question comes, so I should just live, then ask, where is this coming from? Who is asking the question? What is asking that question? And the more you go back into that, the more at some point something will open up, and whatever was in the foreground will go in the background. What's in the background comes in the foreground. It's like an energetic stuff. Anyway, so there's another question, last question for today. Does free will exist? That's an easy one. I mean, this question, free will is, yeah, I mean, there was probably, I don't know, 500 books written, or 5,000, I don't know. You can discuss this endlessly, but if you look at what we said today, You know, I would ask the question, who has free will? Who is it who has free will? Because you can argue and say, yeah, free will exists, free will doesn't exist. If you ask me, I would ask the question, who is there to have free will? And then you can say, yeah, the action figure, it it doesn't have free will, but it claims free will. It claims that it has free will, and that's a big thing. So let's say I'm thinking a thought. Yeah, okay. Let's say there's a thought coming. Let's say the thought is I'm hungry, and then there's a claiming right after, like a split second after, which says, "Oh yeah, I was just thinking that thought." Yeah, and that's also how free will works. Uh, there's a pretend, like, yeah, the action figure pretends to have free will, that's for sure. But when we say that the action figure is basically a pixel on the screen, that's an appearance and a disappearance, then, you know, who is it that has free will? Anyway, we can go into that next time. I think it's a good question to ask. So the last comment here is, we are all that we are not. We are all that we are not. Yes, let's leave it at that. Anyway, so these meetings, just for logistics, they happen these days on Mondays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. Swiss time, same time as now. And I also upload them on YouTube under Benjamin Ramakrishna. You can find them. And that's it. So thank you very much, and see you next time. Bye bye.